Ready? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. That was Amazing Grace by John Newton, and today I want to talk specifically about Mr. John Newton, who was born in the early 1700s, and as a young man he was pressed into slavery in the British Royal Navy, and he became widely known as the worst, basically the worst sailor in the entire Navy. He rallied the crew against the captain. He invented insults and swear words, and he was awful even for a sailor. And it eventually caught up to him as he was marooned in West Africa and forced into slavery on a plantation in West Africa. And while he was in West Africa, he had a revelation, and he came to a spiritual awakening about Christianity, and he decided that he wanted to be a better person. And he was lucky because his family was wealthy, and his father was able to get a slave ship captain to retrieve John Newton from the plantation. And John Newton ended up serving on the slave ship. He became a slave trader, even though he was a Christian. After 3 or 4 years of working on the slave ship, John Newton eventually abandoned the slave ship and went into the ministry, and he went into seminary, Anglican seminary. And it was there that he really began to lament his years as a slave trader, both because of his own experience in slavery and because of the horrificness of slavery itself. After many years of being an Anglican priest, John Newton eventually had the completion of his spiritual awakening when he became an abolitionist and became one of the most fiery and outspoken abolitionists in all of Europe. And I think John Newton is interesting because one thing is because Amazing Grace has become a quintessential Southern song that is sung in black and white churches often. It is in some ways related to the civil rights movement, but I think John Newton's story should be the story of the South. I think in the South we've come a long way. There's no slavery. We don't celebrate the Klan anymore. There's very rarely is there any sort of lynching. But we haven't ever really come to a real significant spiritual awakening as a people. And speaking as a person who considers himself a redneck, I think that we need to come to understand that unless we have a cultural and spiritual awakening as a people, there will be no reconciliation between black and white Southerners, even though we share many cultural artifacts. We eat similar food, we have similar accents, we have the same type of religion. And because we haven't actually had this spiritual awakening about white supremacy in our culture and in American society, we have not had any real spiritual awakening and real reconciliation between blacks and whites. And if we don't have that reconciliation, if white folks don't make amends for the errors of our forefathers in some way, even if it's just to say I'm sorry for what they did, if we don't make that amends, we'll never be able to stop being the quasi-colonial geographic area that the South is. We will still be under the thumb of transnational corporations and people who come in and buy our land and exploit the land and exploit the people of those land. And it's only together that blacks and whites can be able to get these people and these organizations out of our communities and regain the wealth collectively of the South. And it should be a South for Southerners, not a South for transnational corporations. And the thing that keeps us divided is this long-standing madness that I discussed in the first block. That's about all I have to say today. This is Zach Henson, McCalla, Alabama, January 2016.